took the phone off whoever had it before me, and Dick just said one word. He just said one.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Live Through That, the podcast where influential artists of the 80s and 90s talk to us about a pivotal moment in their lives. I'm your host, Mike Hipple, and this week I'm pleased to welcome Simon Rowbottom, also known as Sice, from the critically adored band the Boo Radleys, who Spin magazine described as one of the greatest 90s bands that most Americans haven't heard of. He's about to embark on the 30th anniversary tour with the Boo Radleys, celebrating their ambitious 1993 album, Giant Steps. In addition, they're about to release their 8th album, titled, appropriately enough, 8. We had a great long conversation, so much so that I might have a bonus episode on this one. But for today, Sice tells us about the process of becoming and how sometimes it's about the journey, not the destination. He speaks openly about the pursuit of fame, what he found when he got there, and how those lessons informed his creativity.
So, a pivotal moment for me that kind of involved music, but it was also about the whole of my life. Really, it took place in 1995, and so to give some background, up to that point, we'd been me and Martin and Tim in the Boo Radleys had been friends from school, and our whole drive from as far back as I can remember was to be in a band and to be successful and to be famous, and to really to kind of make it that whole kind of pop star thing. It was almost a case of kind of the music was kind of incidental. It was kind of a way of getting to that kind of promised land. In pretty much in kind of growing up, we grew up near Liverpool, and one of the things that they always say about Liverpool is that people in Liverpool either want to be a famous footballer or they want to be a pop star, because it's kind of like that's the way out. That's the way of the kind of I suppose the mundanity of life. So we kind of throughout the sort of late 80s we were struggling away in a band trying to make it. Nothing else on our minds. Plenty of our friends were also in bands, but they would see it as a kind of sideline thing, and they'd be thinking about their university places, and lives and stuff. But for us, the band was just everything. It was all we wanted to do, and so we sort of lived in very rough places to kind of make it work. And gradually, over a sort of 5 year period, we started to sort of slowly build up. So there wasn't a sort of overnight thing. But this sort of 5 year period sort of started in about 1990, when we made our first album. That was our first vinyl record, an album called Ichabod and I. And this was funded by a local record shop, and about 1,000 copies went into print. And this was the start of this kind of growth, that began. And so over the next sort of 5 years, each stage we kind of grew bigger and bigger, and our sort of breakthrough came in 1993, when we released an album called Giant Steps that was critically acclaimed. It was very critically acclaimed, got album of the year in a number of magazines, and so we were kind of heading along that route. But one of the things was both us and our record company at the time, Creation, recognized that actually we kind of needed chart hits. Critical acclaim wasn't enough, and so we kind of embarked on the next album, which was expected to do well. And it was sort of, we had a single that was launched, a single called Wake Up Boo, prior to the album being released, that did well, and was a first major thing for us in that it got into the UK top 10 and meant that we did television shows and this sort of thing. But the biggest thing that came about, and this is really the pivotal moment, was when the album was released. I think a few months later, we were really, really hopeful that the album would get to number one, that it would be a big, big thing, that the album would get to number one. And the strange thing was, after all this kind of traveling and all this 5 years of work and touring and stuff, we actually happened to be back at home where we were from in a place called Wallasey at this time, I think for a photo shoot, as far as I remember. And I think it was a Sunday afternoon, I think, that you heard what the final chart placing was, and we were sort of crowded round a phone in Martin's family home, and we got a phone call from Dick Green, who ran Creation Records with Alan McGee, and you know, and this is the sort of pivotal moment. It's a snapshot in my mind that I took the phone off whoever had it before me, and Dick just said one word. He just said one, um, and um, that was when it kind of changed. Now, what changed was that that was the kind of embodiment of the moment that we'd always pictured, that we'd always wanted. It was kind of, you know, you're the biggest selling artist in the country on that, you know, on that week. But the big thing for me is that I didn't feel any different, and that's what I think shocked me. That was the kind of pivotal moment, because I think I'd always, at that point, I kind of realized, or perhaps afterwards, and as I started to think about it, I realized what I was investing in this moment, how much I was goal oriented about this kind of success, and what success meant and what fame meant, and how I think I was always living in a kind of fantasy world that it would somehow change everything. So there was a slow kind of dawning, not disappointment so much, but a slow dawning of realization that nothing had actually changed. And I remember we were on a bus and we were driving out, and there was a kind of celebratory, kind of almost screaming out the windows. We were saying, we did it," kind of thing. But it felt very, very empty. And at that point, it felt like the beginning of the end of the band. But it also felt, there was also a sadness there, because it felt like actually we'd finished the climb, you know, and it was almost like you realized actually how much you'd enjoyed the climb, and that the climb was over, and actually that the climb was the thing you were doing it for. Once you got to the peak and you kind of looked around, you kind of felt, okay, it's nice, but the climb's over, and now we've just got the descent. And so it really felt like that we started to enter a descent then. But the important thing about the pivotal thing was that it started to make me reconsider my life and my goals, and how I enjoyed life. And it was quite problematic for a while, in that it took away that drive which we'd had, and from a very, very early age, and suddenly realizing that that was something that was quite irreplaceable. I suppose it sounds fairly trite to say, but it was that thing of actually following a dream. And it was a dream. There was no reality to it, but it was following a dream. And being on that path, there was something very good in living that fantasy. There was something kind of, I don't know, being able to step out of reality a little bit. So from then on, it was almost a kind of thunk down to reality. Um, and in doing that, it was also a very, very good thing, because it kind of made me start to appraise my life, my reality, rather than the fantasy. And I found that I went through a sort of period of the next, I guess it was probably the next 2, 3 years, of realizing, I suppose, of trying to hang on to the dreams, of trying to hang on to something else, but slowly realizing that it wasn't going to happen. It had gone, and it wasn't going to come back. And then I think having to find another purpose, a different purpose, and so it was. I mean, I think for some time, I was probably quite depressed. I was probably quite missing, had a real lack of that purpose, trying to keep the band going. I just, we really, I mean, I think everyone kind of shared this. I mean, I don't really know. I can't speak for everybody, but there was certainly a lack of motivation, and it sort of going towards the end of the band was a very sort of depressing time, and didn't really want to be involved with it, and was actually kind of very relieved when it ended. And so it then kind of my life just became something completely different, and I was still I was still sort of searching for a purpose, but my purpose then became staying at home with my kids. So me and my wife had a couple of kids, and I actually became a stay-at-home dad, and that was my purpose for a good 5 or 6 years. That was a really sort of vital time for me, and taught me a huge amount about myself and kind of my own limits and my own patience and my own understanding, and taught me a huge amount about development. Um, and so, but after another 5 or 6 years, I kind of found myself rudderless again, and so I needed to kind of almost take on that journey again. I realized how much I missed the journey and how much I missed the climb. So in 2007, that's when I started to retrain as a psychologist, and so the climb then was actually ended up being longer than the first climb, I guess, in that it was how long? Probably 7 years in total, to become qualified and set up my own private practice. But it kind of, it one of the things that it kind of it kind of used it to replace that climb, but still didn't really, I don't think, appreciate how to enjoy the journey. I still think I kind of thought it was having the goal. The goal was the thing, and working towards the goal was the thing. But actually, as time's gone on, I've been able to look back towards that pivotal time when we got to number one, and the period before it, and see that it wasn't the goal. It was the journey. It was the process of becoming. That's what is, and that's what I've kind of learned many years later, of the enjoyment of the process. That's where the satisfaction lies. That's where the um, that's where the enjoyment lies. That's where the development lies. Um, so I think it was, even though it was a kind of an apogee of what we were trying to achieve. It was a number one album, and it was being lauded, and it was everything, and we got the fame, and we got the recognition. All those things that as a child I'd viewed as really, really vital, as really, really important. Um, Realize that actually those things are very, very empty, and the process of taking enjoyment out of living every day has been really, really important. And that, 23 years later, now we're making music again in the Boo Radleys. That has made this experience so much better, so much more enjoyable. That actually there's no focus on goals. There's no focus on what we want it to be. It's just simply trying to enjoy the process of every day, whether it's something that's good or whether it's bad. It doesn't really matter. It's just the process of being in it that we're able to focus on. So that pivotal moment, although at the time it felt very flat. It felt quite disappointing. It felt just the opposite of everything I imagined it would be. It's very much taught me a very, very valuable life lesson.
It took some time for Sice to realize that the destination isn't always the end-all be-all. I have to ask, though, where did that initial drive come from to begin with?
I mean, looking at things psychologically, I think it came from unhappiness. I mean, I think it came from, now whether this is within home life or just the kind of general life or school life or those kind of things, which, for a lot of kids isn't particularly happy. It wasn't a particularly affluent area that we grew up in. It wasn't, particularly great. And I think generally it was an unhappiness. Probably, if, kind of boiling it down, I think an awful lot of people go into the fame business, whether that's TV or film or anything. I think the fame business, as opposed to a kind of artistic business like music, or if you go into it for fame, I think you are looking for love. I mean, I think, that's what we see. That's what we see represented. For me, when I looked at those bands who were appearing on Top of the Pops and these things, whatever I would watch as a child, I think what I would see is that those bands were loved. That these people were laughing, clapping and cheering for them, and you'd see footage of the Beatles, and they would be absolutely adored. And I think that's what you look at and think. I mean, none of this was conscious particularly, but I think you look at that, and that's where the drive comes from. It's kind of, I want that adoration, I want that love, and I think that's where finally getting to that point and feeling, actually I don't feel any different, because it's false. It's not real. And anybody who convinces themselves it's real is a fool, because that is not what love is. That's a facsimile. So I think that was really the drive. I can't speak for other members of the band, but I think for me, certainly when I look back now, I think, yeah, that's what I was looking for. That's what I was hoping to find. And and it's such a shame because, I think still very many people these days are looking to find that. And I do think that actually an awful lot of people who set off, I think this is really where there's a mental health struggle that goes on, because I think it's, people will try and use this as a coping mechanism. And, you know, with us, with us, we didn't really get the kickback. And these days, I think the social media kickback that people get is really cruel, because they get to that point, and it's not even with kind of social media, it's not even that people have that realization that this facsimile of love isn't real, but they realize that they're actively disliked, on social media, and that can be, I think that can be hugely crushing. I'm so glad I didn't have to have that experience, because that would have been hugely crushing. So I think that's what that drive is. Or certainly was for me when I look back and ask myself the same question. Why was I so driven by this? What was it that so appealed? But what's been really good is that actually, they did, one of the strange things was that I really sort of only began to, I guess, appreciate the music side of things. It sounds strange, after that kind of pivotal moment. Obviously, I sort of enjoyed the music and did it, but never really took it as the most important thing. I think when you're sort of enamored of publicity and fame, I think that the artistic endeavor sort of disappears into the background. But one of the things was that that's kind of now reversed, and actually none of that other stuff matters. What matters is the artistic endeavor.
Thank you to Sice for taking the time to share your story. He'll be on tour with the Boo Radleys and promoting their new album this summer, and come the fall, he's planning on doing a set of one-man shows around the UK. I also want to thank the band Joop Joop for creating our theme song. You can find out more about their music at joopjoopmusic.com. And a friendly reminder that you can also buy my book on 80s musicians and where they are today, 80s Redux, and its sequel on 90s artists, Live Through That, wherever you buy your books. And if you like this show, please subscribe so that you'll know when the latest episode comes out. You can also follow me on Twitter and Facebook at Mike Hipple Photo, all one word. Thanks for listening. We'll have more stories next week.